Hey everybody, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board Top 10 video. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 games that should have been mega hits. So every now and then a game comes out that seems to hit all the sweet spots for a wide audience. As in, these games are pretty to look at, they are easy to play but still have some good strategic and tactical decisions, and just have that engagement factor that keeps you coming back for more. And for some reason, these games seem to have slipped under the radar and didn't quite hit that pinnacle of popularity or success, despite me thinking they have all those hallmarks of being a game capable of doing that. Now, before I get started on these 11 games, because I do want to give one game an honourable mention, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer. And if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so before I get started on the 10 games, I wanted to give a mention to my number 11, which is Honami. So Honami is a small box card game where you are trying to create 3 columns of cards which will score you points. But each of these cards have a unique number on them. And whenever you're drafting these cards through a simple pass and draft system, you can only place these cards higher than your highest card or lower than your lowest card, meaning that as the game progresses, your restrictions or your options get squeezed, and potentially you'll not be able to draft a card at all. And I like the fact that these cards score in different ways. So for example, some cards which are worth fewer points will score every single round, some will score only the second and third round, and some will score only the final third round. But there's also some cards that will score points based on a sliding scale. And it's all about trying to optimize these, but bearing in mind that you are restricted to what you can play. So you do always want to keep your options open so that you can keep on playing and keep on placing cards. And it becomes so frustrating, but in a good way, when you end up being forced to take a card and creating a huge gap that you know you will not be able to fill in later. Just an absolute blast to play. I'm placing around 15 minutes, and for me, this one should be one of those quintessential small box card games that every gamer should have in their collection. I'm talking about games like No Thanks or games like Six Nimmt. This one for me should be up there with those. A brilliant game as Honami, my honourable mention at number 11. Okay, so let's get into the bulk of the list here, and at number 10 I have District Noir. Now this is a small box 2-player only game. It's actually a retheming of an older game called Throne and Grail. It was an Asian design, but this one has this kind of more of a gangster theme to it, and I love the mechanisms in this game as you're trying to collect sets of cards, but on your turn all you're going to do is you're going to add a new card to this row in between you and your opponent, or you are going to take the last 5 cards in that row. And these cards range from the sets you're trying to collect for points. They can just be simply pure points at face value. They can be negative points, or they can even be these kind of sudden death style cards where if you collect 3 of those, you will instantly win the game. And I love the way that you are forced to either play a card or take those 5 cards. But as soon as you've taken those 5 cards, you're going to be forced to play the rest of your cards in your hand, which could just lay points at the feet of your opponents. It's all about knowing when to strike when the iron is hot. You can use a bit of bluffing here by luring some good cards down there, and then smashing down some negative cards so your opponent are forced to take those. And of course, your opponent is trying to do the same thing to you. A lot of game in only say 20 minutes to play this one, and for me this is up there with the 2-player greats, your Lost Cities, games like that. This one is as good. It's fast, it's punchy, the decisions are quite agonizing at times, and it's just a fantastic design. So that is District Noir at number 10. At number 9, I have Renat. So this is actually a Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling co-design. They've made some colossal hits in terms of board games. This one is an area control game that actually uses a domino mechanism in order to increase your coverage on the board. So you have a very nice looking board and these lovely kind of wooden dominoes that you're going to be placing onto the board. And whenever you place one of these dominoes, you can choose to increase your influence in the adjacent regions by putting these bushes down there. And the bigger the region, the more points you're going to get essentially. There's a few extra little wrinkles where if you are, say, tying for a region, it will go down to the next player, so you can use some blocking going on there. And, to be honest, subjectively, this game was a little bit too light for me, but I can turn on my objective head and think, this game hits so many marks that are generally hallmarks of popular games. It's very pretty to look at. It has those nice components. It has good decisions. It has a simple core mechanism of that domino placement, but a few extra wrinkles in terms of those little twists. And it's all just a lovely package. Plays in around 45 minutes. And it can get pretty damn nasty as well if you want to engage in that style of gameplay. So yeah, this one is definitely a wolf in sheep's clothing, but this game in itself is such a pure and clean design that I think should have blown up to popularity as those kind of more popular nature-themed games. You're talking your Wingspans and things like that. This one I think is a better game than Wingspan, yet it didn't quite reach that level of popularity, and I think it should have done. So that is Renature at number 9. At number 8, I have Pergamon. So Pergamon might be a little bit of an anomaly on this list because I did say they're generally, or these games should be very attractive to look at or have that mass market appeal. I think this game kind of did its own legs by making it look a little bit bland from the box cover alone, because the gameplay here is, God, it should be so more widely played. But again, the box art is a little bit misleading and it makes it look like a stuffy, boring style game when that is simply not the case. So this is somewhat of a bidding style game with some set collection as you're trying to collect these artifacts and string them together to get kind of big displays or exhibits of these items and display them in order to get points. But what I really love about the game is the bidding mechanism here. It's so distinct and unique, unlike anything else I've seen before, where each round there's going to be kind of an undetermined, but you can make a pretty fairly accurate guesstimate of what is going to be in these bags of money. And you kind of get these chests or these money bags, and you are going to be placing your meeple on this track, saying how much money you want from those bags. Do you want to go early and not get many coins, but guarantee yourself an early spot in terms of turn order? Or do you want to go later, try and be greedy and get tons of money, except that you'll go later in the turn order, but perhaps that all the money will be taken by the other players by the time it gets to you. So I do love that speculation. Do I want to reserve myself an early place in the turn order because all the artifacts I want might be taken by the time it gets to me? Yeah, I could be flush with coins, but there could be nothing there for me to buy, or of course the vice versa of that. It's only about 45 minutes. I think the game itself is very attractive, despite the off-putting box art. And for me, this is that perfect entry-level Euro that are always, widely popular. And it has that unique mechanism as well. How many games nowadays have unique mechanisms? Pergamon has a completely unique mechanism that I've never seen before. I've played hundreds of Euro games and I've never seen this mechanism, and I think it's an outstanding mechanism that holds its own and could differentiate itself from the pack of hundreds of similar style games, but you yet to have that magical ingredient. I think this game has that magical ingredient and is an absolute joy to play. It's a lovely game and one that is criminally kind of overlooked, and it shouldn't be because it is a solid design, accessible, not overwhelming, but still has enough going on to keep you interested. So that is Pergamon at number 8. At number 7, I have Hoba. So Hoba is another area control game, but this one uses the foundation of Sudoku as a mechanism. Wonderfully elegant, where all you're doing on your turn is you're deploying these little stones onto this grid and trying to control these different regions. Each stone has a different number on it. The higher the number, the more the influence, the more likely that you control a region. But the lower numbers are useful because if you deploy them next to these kind of koi ponds, then you can potentially get these koi tokens and double the points of another region. And I love this idea, or this restriction, as I said, with the Sudoku thing going on, where you cannot place the same number token in the same row or column as an existing token, or even in the same region, as an existing token of that number. So you are always squeezed down on what you can do, and you have to optimally place all your different markers, knowing when to balance the high influence with the low influence. It plays in around 20 minutes, lots of decision space here. Again, almost zero rules bloat at all. I mean, there's no exceptions to the rules, it's simply just deploy those tokens onto the map, but the decision space is there. You do have to make those meaningful decisions. Elegance personified, in my opinion, and I have no idea why this one didn't take off. It looks distinguished. It's a sophisticated game, easy to play. I've never had a bad game of this one, but even more seasoned gamers are going to get a lot from this because, as I said, there are meaningful decisions to be made from the get-go. So that is Hoba at number 7. At number 6, I have the Bunk. So the Bunk is a betting and bluffing style game that does tailor more towards those higher player counts. You want at least 4 players to play this one, but it's nice to have a game with a bit more meat on the bones than your traditional party style games when you are looking at that 5 or 6 players that you have around the table. This one, the objective is to get as much money as you can by taking money through these kind of gambling tables that are put in this big rondel. Each round there's going to be more money being put into the fold and placed on these tables. And I love this system of each round you have a number of these cards that you're going to be assigning to particular tables, and these cards can be like double cards that will really increase the value of that cash. They can be things such as traps, so that if other people land on those tables, you will get the money instead of them. And even a bluff card that you can of course use to distract and misguide your opponents. A wonderful game that actually has that huge fun factor. It has that real Las Vegas feel to it. Huge stakes at times. Even if you're falling behind, you've always got that potential for a big score and get lots of money and get right back into the mix. And I think this is actually one of the best games in terms of having a catch-up mechanism that is just seamless, because if you are winning, as in you have the most money, you start moving your pawn first, so you are drip feeding more information to the other players and maybe letting them know where you're deploying your cards. Just again, it blows my mind how this game isn't more popular, because this is a game that almost anybody can play. It has that mass market feel to it, but it still has some gaminess. Again, laugh out loud moments, again, high stake moments, high pressure, and it's just an absolute joy to play. So that is the Bunk at number 6. At number 5, I have Cursed Court. Now this is actually another betting and bluffing style game, but this one uses a little bit more deduction, as each round you are given these cards that you are going to be sharing that information with your opponent. So only you and your neighbours are going to know a particular card type. So for example, me and the player to my right will know a card, me and the player to my left will know a card, but nobody else will see those particular cards. And as the game progresses, you are going to be deploying your little wagering chips on the main board to guess which characters are currently in the mix, because there's going to be quite a substantial amount that are not in the mix. So for example, you might say, well, the king, I've seen 2 of those, so I'm going to wager quite heavily on the king and hopefully get a lot of points that way. Maybe I'm going to bet on the top row of characters, or maybe the middle column, or maybe I diagonal, because I've seen all those. But what I love about this is the way that you can misdirect your opponents, because again, everybody only has a small piece of the puzzle, and if you say bet on a character that you know isn't in the mix, people might think, well, they know something I don't, therefore I'm going to use my tokens to outbid those. Each time you outbid somebody, you have to bid at least double the amount, so you're going to quickly go through your wagering tokens. But that character could have never been there in the first place. Therefore, you've tricked your opponents into betting on something that never existed, which is always, a laugh out loud moment. Very simple in its design, very clean and, straightforward. But the decisions are there. How are you going to pace yourself? When are you going to go all in on something? Are you going to spread your bets a bit more evenly? Are you going to take that punt and gamble and bet on something that might come out later, but not out yet? Yeah, just an absolute joy to play. Again, another game you probably want at least 4 people to get the most from. It does work okay at 3, but at that 4, 5 or 6 player count, it is a fantastic game. And I think that one of the biggest things for me about this game is that I really do rack my brain over why this game wasn't a hit, because all they needed to do with this game is to repackage it in a number of different IPs. You know, you could make this a Pokemon theme, you could make this Harry Potter, you could make it Marvel, Lord of the Rings, whatever, it doesn't matter, there's no theme in it anyway, but the artwork is going to sell this one because all those different characters are just particular characters just because they are. So for me, there is a lot of money being left on the table with this one. I think this one could be, you know, a game that could be in so many people's collection. Even non-gamers could get a lot from this game because again, it is so clean, and the rules don't get in the way of this game. It's all about wagering and trying to take those risks and those choices. Great game, again, very much flew under the radar. It's quite a few years old now. I think this is about 7 years old, and yet it has not found its place in the board game space. So that is Cursed Court at number 5. At number 4, I have Finca. So Finca is an entry-level Euro-style game that uses the rondel mechanism, where you're going to be moving your pawns around these different kind of different sections or segments on this wheel, and wherever you land is going to be the amount of fruit that you will take. But there are little things within that wheel that are interesting, because depending on the amount of characters on the wheel you just left is the amount of space that you move, and on the space you land on is the amount of fruit that you get, or the quantity of fruit that you get. So if there's 4 people on this orange space, then I'll get 4 oranges. And what you're trying to do is you're collecting these resources or these fruits and cash them in against these different contracts on this board, trying to get as many points as you can, collecting sets and so on. But there are wrinkles in this game. For example, you need to go around that rondel a set amount of times before you can get these donkey tokens to cash them in the first place. Otherwise, you will not have that option. But my favourite twist in this game is that if you end up stockpiling too much fruit, if say somebody takes enough fruit, some more of that type of fruit, and there's no more in the general supply, then all of that fruit is going to go back into the general supply and go to waste if you've hoarded it, and then start being distributed from there. So you cannot be too greedy in this one, or you're going to certainly be at the risk of wasting all of your effort. And there's an additional twist as well, where as you start cashing in all these resources and burning through these contract tokens or tiles, then there's going to be one remaining tile on each of those regions, and if you have the majority of that particular fruit type, you'll get some bonus points. So timing really does come into play here, as you want to be depleting these stacks when they suit you and not the other players. Otherwise, you'll be just giving them points. For me, this again is so accessible, it's so playable. Those few twists make it interesting. It's bright, it's colourful, it's lovely to look at. Very family friendly, gateway level game, but not boring. You're not going to get tired of this within a few plays. It's going to keep you coming back, and it's just a lovely game, and I cannot understand why this one didn't blow up. So maybe it'll get a reprint, maybe it'll get kind of released to a wider audience and more people will know about it, but as it stands, I have no idea why this didn't take off, because it's so superior to a lot of those other kind of widely regarded gateway style resource management games. So that is Finca at number 4. At number 3, I have First Rat. So First Rat really is a hybrid style game, because it's like a Euro game with some resource management, you have some engine building, you have a race factor, so lots of things going on here, but it all condenses down to one of the most simple mechanisms you could imagine, which is almost like a roller move, but not quite, where you can simply move your rat a certain amount of spaces. I think you can move one rat up to 5 spaces up this track, or you can move several rats, I believe 2 or 3 spaces. And depending on where you land, you'll start collecting resources. You can collect those or trade those resources in to contribute towards the spaceship and get points that way. But I love that there's additional things going on here. So for example, you can reach these certain checkpoints and go back to the beginning of the track and get like permanent abilities to maybe take shortcuts, or get game-breaking abilities by being able to share spots with other people, or things like that. Additionally, you can climb up the separate track and start increasing the yield of resources you'll get when you land on those particular spots. And everything in this game has a sense of urgency to it. You want to be the first to reach the top of the track because you get a ton of points. You want to be the first to contribute to those different spaceships to get a ton of points, to donate cheese. You want to be the first to do everything, really, even like there's some public objectives and things. It's all just so well kind of harmonised, despite there being quite a lot going on. I find this game remarkably easy to teach, but when you really break it down into the separate kind of compartments of this game, there's quite a lot going on here. And for me, it really does walk that perfect tightrope between being accessible, but Euro, tactical, yet a little bit strategic, constant decisions to be made, when to sacrifice one thing to do another, again, what to prioritise at any time. It looks great and has a charming appeal to it, which younger audience will like and more gateway fans will like, but it still has enough going on to appease more experienced gamers. So for me, this one has such a wide audience. I mean, so many people could enjoy this one, and I think it is a wonderful, wonderful design. I know people who like or who know about this game tend to be really big fans of it, but that audience is small at the moment, and I think it could be way, way bigger, and it should be bigger because it is that good of a game. So that is First Rat at number 3. At number 2, I have Vikings. So Vikings is a Michael Kiesling design who has made so many colossal hits, Azul being one of them. This one is a tile placement game with a bit of drafting, as you are drafting these tiles and these Viking meeples hand in hand and putting them on your own little kind of scoring board. Now you are trying to create these little islands, and each of these different islands go in different rows and have a particular Viking type assigned to it. So for example, you might have these yellow Vikings which will generate you income when it comes to the income phase, or some of them will just simply get you points. Some of them will feed your workers because at the end of the game everybody needs to be fed. Some of them will repel off these threats that will come and invade, and so on. It's all about kind of spinning as many plates to make sure you've got a constant income to keep on buying the Vikings and tiles that you want, as well as fighting off those threats, as well as being able to feed your workers and of course get points in the first place. The drafting system in this game is quite interesting because the prices of everything varies depending on what is taken and when. So for example, if there's a really cheap item on there, you might buy that cheap item, the wheel will then rotate and make all the more expensive items cheaper from that point. And you even get rewarded by spending a lot of money and going for the expensive items right out of the gate. So there's always an incentive to do everything in this game. This one is it is a step beyond games like Carcassonne, but not that far beyond, yet the decision space is so much richer, and there's so many things you need to consider here with this remarkably elegant and playable game. Again, it bridges that gap between kind of a hobby game and a gateway level game. There's enough to sink your teeth into, yet it's very playable and easy to easy to latch onto and get involved in from the get-go. So for me, this one is like one of the first games I thought about when I thought about making this list, because it hits so many checkpoints. And again, when I think about games like Everdell and your Carcassonnes and your Wingspans and these styles of hugely successful games, I think they're all inferior to Vikings, and yet they all kind of go for that same demographic. So I have no idea why some latch on and some don't. It has a little bit of a mature look to it. It has that more traditional Euro aesthetic, but I don't think it's an unattractive game, and maybe even with a fresh lick of paint, this one could go above and beyond. And all it takes is that word of mouth to start spreading, and this game could have been as big as those aforementioned games. So that is Vikings at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Caesar's Empire. Now, this is a route building and set collection style game set in the Asterix and Obelix universe, where you are going to be placing these legions out from Rome and kind of reaching new locations on the map. And when you reach a new location, you're going to collect a couple of tokens which are going to score you points based on set collection. So different types of these tokens you collect are going to score you a ton of points, but you're also going to get rewarded by collecting duplicates of the same type. But what I really love about this game is the subsequent scoring mechanism, where after you've collected your tokens, you are going to trace the route back from that location all the way back to Rome, and for every legion that you've passed through, that player is going to generate a point. So whether that be all of your own units or other players' units, they will generate points. So even when it's not your turn, you are invested because you will passively start generating points as you kind of piggyback off other players and so on. This is almost like a filler game, really, because you can play in around 30 minutes, despite being a big box and a big board and tons of these kind of lovely plastic Legion components. It is so punchy, it's so snappy, and every turn is meaningful. There's different approaches you can go for. Do you want to focus on those routes? Do you want to focus on the sets? And so on. It's just such a pure design. And for me, this completely blows games like Ticket to Ride out of the water. It's cleaner, yet it's still more engaging. The decisions are a bit more meaningful in my opinion, and it's much faster too. So really, I don't see any negative this game has. I think it's deceptively involved. I think maybe at first appearances, this one might seem like a very gateway level, throwaway style game. And if you want to go in with that mindset, that might be what you get from it. But if you start understanding the nuances and the different things you can explore here, what to prioritize at any time, I think the return on investment with this game is off the charts. And this is like a never going to go from my collection. I think this is kind of the hallmark of what I like. Almost no rules, tons of decision space, everything matters, different approaches, set collection done right, and rewarding turns, passive player interaction without being nasty, but still being a little bit mean at times, but not in a bad way. And yeah, just an absolute triumph of a design that just somehow never really took off and never had the wind under its sails, when I certainly believe it should have. So that is Caesar's Empire at number 1. So there we have it, that concludes the list. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video and discovered a game or two that you were not aware of. If you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel, and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.